Hello and welcome to the Indian Council of Medical Research Online Prescribing Skills Course 2020 for the Indian medical graduate. I am Professor Abhijit Hajra of the Department of Pharmacology, Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research, Kolkata. Today we are going to discuss about prescribing in the perioperative period. After watching this video, please remember to attempt 5 multiple choice questions linked to this module and give a feedback. You will find these in the assignment section. My co-authors for this module and the reviewers are listed on this slide. What are our learning objectives for this module? So, at the end of this module, you will be able to review the medication history of a patient posted for planned surgery and identify drugs that need omission or dose changes. You will be able to write a prescription for managing preoperative anxiety in an adult patient. You will be able to prescribe antibiotics for prevention of surgical site infections in planned surgery. You will write a prescription for postoperative pain management following surgery in an adult patient. Continuing further, you will be able to write a prescription for postoperative nausea and vomiting following surgery under general anesthesia. You will write a prescription for managing perioperative shivering, and you should also be able to address prophylaxis of deep vein thrombosis in adult patients undergoing planned surgery. Finally, you will be able to counsel patients and caregivers appropriately in these situations. Why is this topic important? We know that perioperative medication involves several important issues. The knowledge and skills necessary in such scenarios are often deficient in junior doctors. Some common examples of irrational drug use include inappropriate use of antibiotics for surgical site infections, unnecessary use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs NSAIDs as analgesics, and on the other hand under-usage of paracetamol, non-usage and lack of awareness of venous thromboembolism prophylaxis. So, first let us come to some important do's and don'ts regarding prescribing in perioperative situations. It is important to always consult the surgical team and senior residents involved in the care of the patients. It is important to record details of medical history, investigation reports and all ongoing medication. We should adhere to antibiotic prophylaxis guidelines for surgical site infections. We should use first line pharmacotherapy for preoperative anxiety and postoperative pain, nausea, vomiting and shivering, and it is important to reduce the risk of postoperative venous thromboembolism. On the other hand, we must not use antibiotics casually, ignoring guidelines. We should neither prolong the course of antibiotic prophylaxis unnecessarily. If patients have complaints of anxiety, pain, nausea, vomiting or shivering, these must not be ignored. And finally, we should not attempt to massage any painful limb area following surgery. We will come to the first and obvious perioperative situation, that is the need for reviewing preoperative medication. A lot of information on this is available and we are going to focus on some common situations. Regarding medications to continue from the cardiovascular system, calcium channel blockers, beta blockers, nitrates and antiarrhythmics generally must continue. From the respiratory system, bronchodilators need to be continued. From the endocrine system, levothyroxine, corticosteroids, short acting insulin or insulin infusions generally continue. From the central nervous system, antiepileptics, anti-Parkinsonian drugs and some antipsychotic drugs should continue, and there are various other medicines that should continue, including anti-reflux medication and antiretroviral drugs. Now, since antiretroviral drugs are prone to a lot of drug-drug interactions, we have sites on the internet at which we can check such drug interactions, and one such freely accessible site is listed on this slide. If we consider medicines that need to be stopped prior to surgery, from the cardiovascular system we have angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers and diuretics, which should be discontinued from the day before surgery, except if the patient has congestive heart failure or some other cardiac comorbidities. Warfarin needs discontinuation at least 4 days before surgery. Unfractionated heparin should be stopped 6 hours before and restarted 12 hours post-operatively. Clopidogrel 7 days before surgery unless there has been a cardiac event within 3 months. Interestingly, some authorities do not recommend withdrawal of ACE inhibitors and ARBs prior to regular surgery. From the endocrine system, oral hypoglycemics should be stopped on the morning of surgery. Oral contraceptive pills and estrogen based hormone replacement therapy should be discontinued 4 weeks before surgery. From the central nervous system, tricyclic antidepressant should be discontinued with dose tapering over 1 to 2 weeks. Monoamine oxidase inhibitors discontinued 2 weeks prior to surgery, and lithium preparations 24 hours before surgery. Regarding NSAID analgesics, if they have long T-halves, then they should be discontinued 1 week before surgery, but those with relatively short T-half can be stopped 3 days before the operation. Now let us come to our first case scenario in this module. This is on preoperative medication review. A 54-year-old man is admitted for open cholecystectomy for gallstones. He has hypertension and type 2 diabetes, which are under control using amlodipine 5 mg daily and glimepiride 1 mg daily. You are to review his medication prior to surgery. Your review should preferably go like this. We can continue with amlodipine, but we should consider changing glimepiride. This is because calcium channel blockers need not be omitted before surgery, but a long acting oral hypoglycemic should be omitted preoperatively. The blood glucose should be monitored every 4 hours, and if the glucose level is above 270 mg per dl, insulin infusion should be started. The substrate for insulin infusion would be 0.45% sodium chloride with 5% dextrose, and the infusion is ideally given by a syringe infusion pump. We have to target a capillary blood glucose level of 108 to 180 mg per dl, and if needed we have to use potassium supplements. Let us come to a second case scenario. This is also on preoperative medication review. A 61-year-old woman with a large uterine fibroid is admitted for abdominal hysterectomy. She is hypertensive but non-diabetic, and she is currently receiving atenolol 50 mg per day and aspirin 75 mg per day. What should we do regarding changes in her medication? The preferred course of action would be to continue the beta blocker atenolol but withhold aspirin. Beta blockers need not be omitted before surgery, but conventional teaching is aspirin should be stopped 7 days prior to the operation. However, we must note that if aspirin is used for secondary prevention after acute myocardial infarction, acute coronary syndromes, stenting or stroke, it may need to be continued rather than stopped under careful supervision. So, if needed and if in doubt, we can seek help from cardiologists in this regard. Now we come to a case scenario on preoperative anxiety. A 65-year-old man is posted for transurethral resection of the prostate for benign prostatic hyperplasia. His past medical history is unremarkable with a normal blood pressure, ECG tracing, chest X-ray and a normal blood sugar profile. On the night before surgery, he is found to be anxious with the blood pressure at 150 to 86 millimeters of mercury. In addition to reassurance by the medical team, the question is, would we prescribe any drug to control the anxiety? Now, it is obvious that in this case, the raised blood pressure is probably due to apprehension regarding the surgery. This can be controlled by an oral benzodiazepine such as 2 mg oral lorazepam. Controlling anxiety with benzodiazepines will offer two added benefits. It will ensure a good night's sleep, and benzodiazepines are also known to induce amnesia about perioperative procedures. Now we come to prophylaxis for surgical site infections. Now for considering prophylaxis, we have to categorize the wound on the basis of the infection potential, and there is a standard classification of surgical wounds in this regard. Class 1 or clean wound are uninfected operative wounds in which no inflammation is encountered. The respiratory, alimentary, genital or the urinary tract are not entered. Operative incisional wounds and closed wounds following burn trauma are included in this category. On the other hand, class 4 wounds are obviously dirty and infected. They will include old traumatic wounds with retained devitalized tissues and those that involve existing clinical infections or perforated viscera. When we are considering antimicrobial prophylaxis for surgical site of infections, we should be able to first categorize the wound and then select the prophylaxis. ICMR in 2017 has come out with antimicrobial prescribing guidelines covering surgical site infections. You will note that these guidelines, which you can see on the table here, selects antimicrobials on the basis of the likely microbial pathology. So, ideally we should have support from the microbiology laboratory in selecting our prophylaxis. For class 1 wounds, no prophylaxis may actually be offered, or at the best we can offer a single perioperative dose of cefuroxime or cephalexin, ideally 2 grams. Whereas with class 4 wounds, we will require prophylaxis with more than one antimicrobial to cover the whole spectrum of gram negative bacilli, anaerobes and possibly gram positive bacteria as well. So, you should familiarize yourself with these guidelines before you can attempt prophylaxis for surgical site infections. Now, let us come to a case scenario on surgical site infection prophylaxis. A 52-year-old man with a right-sided inguinal hernia was admitted for a planned herniorrhaphy with mesh repair. Now, what prophylaxis would you like to offer in this case? So, let us first consider what kind of wound it is. Now, hernia surgery is likely to result in clean wounds, so which would be of the class 1 clean uninfected type. So, in these cases, as we have already discussed, antibiotic prophylaxis is not mandatory. However, note that use of mesh repair in herniorrhaphy is associated with a higher risk of surgical site infection. So, we may prescribe a single 2 gram dose of oral cephaloxime 1 hour prior to the procedure. So, remember, you have to consider the type of wound, the likely antimicrobial spectrum and any special considerations of the patient before selecting antibiotics and their doses. Managing postoperative pain. Although pain is controlled during surgery by some form of general or local anesthesia, often supplemented by opioid analgesics, postoperative pain continues to be an important consideration in many different types of surgery. Mild pain can be managed with regular dosing of paracetamol 1 gram every 6 to 8 hours. We can also consider NSAID analgesics unless they are contraindicated, and common NSAID contraindications include impaired renal function, peptic ulcer disease, asthma and known hypersensitivity to NSAIDs. With moderate pain, in addition to regular paracetamol and regular NSAIDs, we add weak opioids such as tramadol 50 to 100 milligram every 6 to 8 hours. If the pain is severe, then we have to replace the weak opioid with strong opioids. Now, strong opioids traditionally have been pethidine 1 milligram per kg by intramuscular slow IV injections every 4 to 6 hours, or even oral morphine 20 to 30 milligram 4 hourly. But we must remember that strong opioids are controlled drugs and their availability is a problem. We must also keep in mind opioid contraindications, including drowsy patients, respiratory depression and severe dysfunction of kidney or liver function. If the pain is still unresolved, then we should contact the surgical or the anesthetic team for a review of the situation. We come to a case scenario on postoperative pain. A 34-year-old woman with a body weight of 72 kg has undergone lateral sphincterotomy for anal fissure. 5 hours following surgery, she is complaining of moderate pain at the surgical site with accompanying nausea. She is alert and her vital signs are stable. What can we do to give her relief? This patient has declared her pain to be moderate. So, it can be controlled with paracetamol 1 gram by the IV route. If the pain persists despite use of paracetamol, she may be given a parenteral opioid. An example would be 100 milligram of pethidine by intramuscular injection, followed by the institution of an NSAID analgesic such as diclofenac 75 to 100 milligram in controlled release formulation every 12 hours, assuming that by this time she is in a state to take oral medicines. Now, let us come to postoperative nausea and vomiting. This can be a distressing feature following surgery, particularly surgeries involving manipulation of the viscera. Now, PONV is multifactorial. Multiple central nervous system pathways and neurotransmitters are involved. The use of prophylaxis versus treatment remains a controversial issue. If you are considering prophylaxis, then a good choice would be a 5-HT3 receptor antagonist such as ondansetron. It can be offered in doses of 1 to 8 milligram by oral, IM or IV routes every 8 hours depending upon the clinical condition of the patient. It is reported to be cost effective in high risk patients where the PONV risk is more than 30 to 33%. However, since PONV is multifactorial, we often need to use antiemetic drugs in combination. So, drugs with different modes of action may be combined when the symptoms are severe. Example would be ondansetron combined with dexamethasone 6 to 10 milligram IV as a single dose. In fact, multimodality therapy is often used in this situation. Now, we come to perioperative shivering. Now, the goal is preferably to maintain normothermia so that patients do not experience shivering following surgery. Covering with warm blankets, hot air mattresses in the recovery room can be used. Radiant heat warmers are also used. However, if the patient still continues to shiver, we can use low dose opioids, and shivering is commonly associated with the use of volatile anesthetic agents, spinal and epidural anesthesia. Pethidine 10 to 25 milligram by slow IV injection at the onset of shivering is a good choice. However, we must remember that pethidine can provoke nausea and vomiting, and if overdose can induce respiratory depression. Tramadol, nefopam and clonidine are other alternatives to pethidine which have been tried successfully in many cases of perioperative shivering. Prophylaxis of venous thromboembolism is an important but often ignored issue. There are many known risk factors for venous thromboembolism following surgery. This includes a history of venous thromboembolism in the past, older age, prolonged surgery, typical example being lower limb orthopedic procedures and major trauma. All patients with a risk of venous thromboembolism should preferably undergo early mobilization and mechanical thromboembolism prophylaxis unless contraindicated. These mechanical modes include antiembolism, elastic stockings and intermittent pneumatic compression devices. Now, these are much more readily available these days than earlier. But if the risk of thrombosis is also high, we should consider using in addition pharmacological prophylaxis with enoxaparin or other low molecular weight heparins. Now, the dosing is best considered in detail, and we can refer to the detailed prescribing literature of these individual drugs regarding the proper doses to be selected in different types of surgical procedures. What are our take home messages from this module? It is important to record details of medical history, including hypersensitivity and all ongoing medication for surgical patients. It is important to look for drugs warranting omission in a perioperative situation and report the same for withdrawal or replacement to the surgical team. Preoperative anxiety is common and can be effectively managed with oral benzodiazepines on the day before surgery. Preoperative midazolam will be administered additionally by the anesthesiologist if necessary. Surgical site infections should be prevented by strict aseptic precautions and adhering to antimicrobial prophylaxis guidelines such as the ICMR guidelines of 2017. Inappropriate antibiotics and unnecessarily prolonged courses of antibiotics must be avoided. Carrying on, postoperative pain is common and often can be managed with paracetamol, NSAID analgesics and opioids in a stepwise manner depending upon the intensity of the pain and contraindications in individual patients. Postoperative nausea and vomiting is multifactorial, and prophylaxis with ondansetron may be offered to high risk patients. Otherwise, treatment can be given with ondansetron along with dexamethasone. Perioperative shivering and hypothermia are common and can be prevented or managed with supportive warming and low dose opioids. Venous thromboembolism prophylaxis is often underused, ignored, which may be life threatening if the patient cannot be mobilized early. We should keep this issue in mind, and patients at high risk should receive pharmacological venous thromboembolism prophylaxis in addition to mechanical measures. Finally, if in doubt, we should always consult the surgical or anesthetic team involved for guidance. So, these are some of the references that we consulted while developing this module. I would like to acknowledge all the members of the Rational Use of Medicine Committee at IPJMR Kolkata for their help and guidance in developing the contents of this module. If you want detailed information about individual drugs, then you can consult the website Prescribers Digital Reference. So, thank you. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. Now, we would request you to go to the assignment section and attempt the 5 multiple choice questions related to the module. Please also remember to leave a feedback. Thank you again and happy learning.